Okay.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Omar Fareed Khan podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jonah. Jonah, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I met you at the pre-encampment of SJP stuff, and that was cool. And the way I got involved with all that was because I felt like there was a giant guilt presiding over me. And I was like, wow, like there's just so much going on, and I'm not a part of it. And then it's like I wanted to be. And so that's kind of been the motivating fuel for me is the guilt. I'm curious, how did you get involved? What inspired you? How did we come to meet that fateful day?
Well, I am Jewish, so I think I felt some similar guilt to you, knowing that there's a country out there that's weaponizing my religion, and committing genocide when we had gone through genocide. Um, I don't know, like 80 years ago. Um, and I've always been pro-Palestine, or like at least since I was like 14. And I didn't really know of any protests or anything until after October 7th. And unfortunately, the fall season is my busy season, and I work as an artist. And when you're an artist, you kind of take all the money that you can get because uh, income is low. So I didn't have any chance to like go to a protest until like 2024. And then, as I got more involved, I started to feel some hope for the cause. And then I just started doing more and more stuff and donating more and, showing up at the popular university and all that stuff, even though I'm not a student at UH. And that's how we met.
Yeah.
But I do have a question for you. How come you didn't get involved before?
So great question. I actually was pretty involved and engaged and active like in the beginning, like in October, November-ish. But I remember that the negative emotions, like the sadness of what was going on, it became so overwhelming for me that it was literally the only thing on my mind. It was the only thing I could feel in my body. It was something so overwhelming that I could feel it in my dreams. And I was like, man, I really need to I need to step back. I need to take a breather. It's kind of getting too much for me. And so I did take that breather, I did step back, and that kind of went on for a minute. And in that time, I felt like I just had time to think. I had time to kind of just be by myself a little and kind of observe what was going on and then feel like, you know what? I got to get back into it. So that's kind of what it was, more or less. But I think it's so cool that you're Jewish and you're pro-Palestinian. What is that like for you? I mean, I imagine that it can be like a black sheep kind of a feeling, eh?
Um, there's a pretty good group of anti-Zionist Jews here. At least like six that I personally know in Houston, and I know of others kind of around the United States. So it's not as isolating, I think, as you might think, but also in terms of the institutions that we have as the Jewish community, like the Jewish Community Center and the temples and the restaurants and all of that stuff. They are 100% Zionist. And so there is the isolation in that part of like the larger community. But I don't think it's any different than being anybody else and being pro-Palestine. I mean, I guess like some people would think that I would have like some kind of attachment to um, the state that occupied Palestine, or any, but any of like, I don't know, like feelings for the victims of Israel, but I don't. So it's not a super complicated issue to me. Um, I know some people feel that it might be more complicated, but to me, it's just like um, there's no question um, that there's genocide going on, and that 100% like I'm gonna support the people who are being hurt right now. Like it's like the same as I support Sudan or the Congolese and the DRC or Haiti or Native Americans in America.
Yeah. Do you think it requires courage to be able to do something like that?
I think it requires courage to speak out in a community when a lot of people are like are silenced, and we see that even not just in the Jewish community, but just in a larger community, like um, Muslim community, or just like the general people, like Americans or worldwide. We see a lot of people who feel sorry for Palestinians and they don't say anything because it's not worth it to speak on social media. It's for fun on social media or whatever, or they don't feel like it's worth it, or that they have a voice, or that they can do anything just as one person. Um, but obviously, not only one person can do something, but one person can join the collective, and the collective is what moves people. So I think it takes that courage to take that first step when it seems like everybody around you doesn't care. But when you find that community of people who do care, you become more emboldened and you realize that we are not the brave ones at all. We have no courage here. The people who actually are brave are the people who are resisting the occupation in Gaza and the ones who are living through the body bags and the rubble and the martyrdom and all of that stuff that's falling apart around them. We're just, we're very privileged in comparison. So
Yeah. I like how you articulated that. I thought it was really interesting when I talked to you that in Judaism there's not a concept of hell, which I thought was very fascinating. And then it made me ask you like what happens to like the Pharaoh of Moses' time when he dies? What was your response to that again? I was curious.
I think I can't remember my exact response. I've the the memory of like a flea or something, but um I probably based on what I learned in Judaism class when I went to Jewish day schools, there's purgatory, and you go to purgatory and you repent, and if you repented enough you get to move up the levels into heaven. There's like a lowest level and then there's the highest levels, and almost nobody immediately will go into heaven because most people are sinners. They hurt other people, they do things wrong. First of all, Judaism is a religion with 8,000 rules. Okay, not 8,000, there's like 613, and so it's hard not to mess one up, especially as we become more modern as religion. We start to lose some of those rules, like not everybody keeps kosher or whatever, and that would be considered something that could get you like not able to get into heaven. So I think he'll probably be in purgatory, which I think is probably worse than hell because it must be torture to just sit around in a gray room with nothing, and like everybody's just sad as hell trying to get out of there. Versus like I don't really know exactly what hell would look like, but I mean that's probably pretty bad too. I don't know. What's your concept of that though? Of like hell and stuff.
Well, before I get into that, one thing that made me curious about that, like in Judaism not being a concept of hell, is what is the concept of the devil? What is the concept of Satan and demons and evil in general? Where does that originate? What's the story behind that?
Um Honestly, I can't remember learning about those specific things. I think we really focus on blessings. Um, and like if you look up prayers, a lot of them is like blessing for rain, blessing for rainbows, blessing for eating, blessing for smelling flowers, blessings for fruit. It's all about recognizing the good and the beauty in the world around you and really connecting with the natural world and your family versus the things that are wrong. Like there's no form of witchcraft or curses or prayers like against people or like that kind of stuff. Like there is like Kabbalism, and we do like kind of have like the Hamsa and the evil eye and stuff for protection, and there is like folklore stuff for protection. But I I've never really learned about um, you know, evil stuff besides like, the typical things that you would learn in the Torah, which is like, after the Israelites left the land of Egypt, and then they're somewhere in the desert, Sinai Desert, and they like Moses goes up Mount Sinai, and it takes him a long time. It's old. It's like 99 or something, and the Israelites are so lost, and they're starting to question their faith, this new faith. They didn't even really know, uh, Judaism like that, because they're under slavery, and they were killing Jewish baby boys, and there's all this stuff. They weren't really much of practice. They like build a golden calf, and then God tells Moses like, "Whoa, that's idolatry," which is like a cardinal sin. Um, and that's kind of like he just gets pretty mad at them. From my memory of the story, and Moses comes down the mountain. He didn't get to go all the way to the top, unfortunately. And he comes down and he's like, "This is bad. We only worship God, like the one God, and God is everything, and God is everywhere." So, yeah, we definitely learn like I just disappeared. What's wrong? But typically, like, I guess if it's like a Sodom and Gomorrah thing, like they all got smited. But we haven't, from my memory, we didn't learn more specific evils that weren't so fairy tale ish.
Does the devil, yeah, does the devil exist in Judaism? Do you know?
My guess would be probably, because Christianity has a devil, and most of what they have was originally from Judaism. So, um, I would have to guess yes, based on the stories of like Lucifer being a fallen angel. He probably was, and we're big on angels. So my guess is that he was a fallen angel, and then he became the devil, I guess. But it's not ever something that we focused on in my learning. But I'm not the most learned person in the world. It's something that I want to like, you know, get back into. So it's something that I would definitely have to do a little bit of research on before I could make more of a educated comment.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's interesting you said fallen angel. In the Muslim tradition, he's just like his own thing, what you would call, I guess, a demon, a jinn, you know?
Mhm.
But yeah, it's interesting because again, that whole like concept of hell, devil, and all that, it's making me think about the story of Adam and Eve. Like, oh, I wonder like what it's like in the Jewish tradition. Maybe it's different, or maybe it's similar. I don't know.
Well, what's the story of Adam and Eve that you know, and then we can see what's if it's potentially different.
Yeah, the story of Adam and Eve is, they're in Eden, in heaven, and God tells them, hey, like, there's just this one thing that you can't eat from. Some say it's a fruit, some say it's wheat. And the devil tempts them. It's like, hey, just eat it because if you eat this, you'll become immortals. And I think that's very fascinating that he says that to them. And so they eat from it. And then, they realize like, oh, like we made a sin, like it was a mistake. And then they repent to God and they get sent to earth, but they repented. And so they're among the good people. But just that part about the devil telling them that if you're only prevented from this because otherwise you'd be immortals. I think that's so fascinating because I feel like so much of humanity is infatuated with being immortalized. And I don't know. I just think that's a very interesting temptation. And that happens to be like the first one. So that's the story, more or less.
Yeah. So there is some differences, and I actually I, I 100% agree that a lot of humanity is fascinated with being immortal, which is why I think we see people become artists or become writers or become filmmakers because they want a part of them to live on forever in some kind of
Yeah.
physical media, even when they die. That's, the fascination with vampires or whatever, which I love vampires. I think they're cool. But, the idea of being young forever and like, living forever, I think it sounds kind of like terrible, but, one life is enough. Can't imagine doubling it or tripling it, but
Speaking of artistry, Macklemore, he released that song, Hidden Hall,
yes.
and it was cool. And you know what I loved about that song? He's got a line in there. He's like, "When I was 7, I learned a lesson from Cube and Easy E." I was like, "Yeah,
Yes,
that's
fuck the
so cool."
police.
Because this whole time this has been going on, I keep thinking about like NWA and Straight Outta Compton. I'm like, it's kind of like an anthem, and I'd expect to kind of hear it somewhere. And it just so happened that he referenced that in his song, which I thought was very fascinating. And something else I was thinking about songs was we were talking, and I told you we're talking about Slipknot, and I said to you, Snuff is one of the best songs ever written by Corey Taylor, and it's like there's just some songs out there where they say everything that kind of needs to be said about a thing. Fell on Black Days by Chris Cornell is one of those. Falling Free by Avor, Patience by Guns N' Roses. Like there's some songs that just they say it, they say it. Um, yeah, that's something I've been thinking about as well.
Yeah, good thoughts, good thoughts. And I agree. Like, I think there's something really beautiful about how music can speak to people and describe somebody's lived experiences. And there's one part of a, a Brooks and Dunn song, it's a country song, and they go like every sad song says everything they've ever felt, and it's it's poignant because it's true, you know. Um, I think people are prone to thinking that they're very individual in their thoughts and their feelings, but we listen to music and we see somebody has summarized it exactly and they put it to music, and I think that's nice to know that we are one and we are all connected through our consciousness, even if we feel very alone or very separated from others.
Yeah, I was once talking to a girl, and she said to me, she felt like she couldn't articulate herself very well. And so she's like, when she felt like she had something important to say to someone, she'd send them a song about it. And it's like, that's my message to you. And I thought that's very interesting. And the power of an artist is they get to speak for people that don't have the words.
Yeah, I think that's nice. That's an interesting way to communicate with people, but if it works, it works. I like it. I mean, people do
Yeah.
that all the time. They'll post songs on their Instagram story or whatever, and they mean it as a message.
Yeah, exactly. Do you ever feel like there's too much of it? Too many songs, too much art?
No, there can never be too much art. There's too much war. There's too much hate. There's too much people separating themselves from others. There's too much math. There's not too much art. There can never be too much art. Maybe some of the art is bad. Maybe I'm not going to be able to ever get around to all of it, but that's completely okay. And I think if you're making bad art, keep making it because somebody out there is going to like it. And if they don't, that's okay. It's fulfilling to you just to make it. And that's nice.
That was so cool. There's too much math. I always think about that. Like, is there too much art or there's too many songs out there? And I don't remember the exact line, but it's a Fiona Apple song, and she says like something like, "I know a sound is still a sound even when no one's around" or something.
Yeah,
And I
it's
just
from
thought that
a
was
poem
pretty,
that she wrote.
huh?
She wrote a poem. She wrote a
She wrote a
poem
poem
from
too. Yeah, yeah.
when the pond was the king.
That is a really good poem, by the way. It's
Yeah,
a good
isn't that
poem.
from that? Isn't that line from that?
I think that song is from that album, but I don't think that line is from
Oh,
there.
okay.
Yeah, I think. But has Bob Ross ever inspired you in your painting?
Not in my personal paintings, but I do work as a painter, and we do a lot of landscapes. And um, I had to learn how to paint mountains, so I did watch a Bob Ross tutorial for that. And I think he's very chill. It's nice to paint and then hear him painting as well and talking about how he does it. Um, I think he's a cool guy. I wouldn't say he's an inspiration to me, but I think he seems nice, and his paintings are objectively pretty, but they're not, in the style that I like. I wouldn't hang one up in my house, me personally.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember it was like about a year ago. I watched his documentary on Netflix, and it was one of those art things where it kind of just said the sort of things that I was feeling, or it kind of connected with me in some way. I remember that was a time in my life where I kind of needed to cry. I couldn't cry, and then I watched that documentary. I was like, wow, Bob Ross helped me cry. It's so interesting, going back to this concept of just artists, like how they are able to encapsulate feelings and emotions and thoughts and stuff. It's very fascinating to me. Always is.
I keep disappearing, so
Yeah, you're like a
I'm the
ghost.
light.
Yeah,
I don't know if this is worse or better, but so can you see me better? I keep disappearing. God damn it.
yeah. It's also a rainy day out in Houston,
It
eh?
is. It is.
Oh my God, it got dark.
Yeah, I got dark real quick. That's better, right?
That is better, yeah. The other day I was talking to my kid cousin, and she was telling me, like, hey, there's this girl in my school. She threw a chair at three different teachers. And I was like, oh my God. And I was just sitting there in the car reflecting, and I'm like, there's a lot of kids out there, and we all grow up into different people. But like nobody knows anybody's past, right? And if they do, it's like they do. But it just made me think about all the people that I've met and all the people that I know. It's like, wow, maybe they have like a crazy past. But it's also hopeful because they could grow up and be like cool people.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, she threw a chair.
Had three teachers. Yeah.
Did she hit anybody?
Say
Or
that
was it
again.
honest? Did she hit anyone?
Yeah. Three
Oh,
teachers.
well, okay. But just because you throw a chair at someone doesn't necessarily mean that you hit your target. That's basically
Yeah.
what I was trying to.
Yeah. But man, that it also reminded me of I don't know if you've ever seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, but Fire Lord Ozai. It's like, when he's like a little kid, it's like, oh, he was just a little baby, and then he grows up to be this villain. It's like, oh my God, it's crazy.
I haven't seen Avatar: The Last Airbender for some reason. I have no reason to have like not seen it. I just never watched it like as a kid or now.
Mm. I've met people like that. I've never seen it, but it's interesting because I was talking to one of my friends, and he was like, "But I grew up on iCarly," and I'm like, "Oh, well, I never did." But it's interesting. Like, we could all be like in the same age groups, but we kind of also like we're attracted to different things. Like, oh yeah, like that show was my show, that movie was my movie, that song was my song.
For sure. I was a Cartoon Network kid, so I was watching like Chowder and Flapjack and like those kinds of cartoons.
Mm.
Weird kind of cartoons.
Chowder and Flapjack, yeah. I remember Schnitzel, that guy.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Good show. I want his hat. The purple hat.
Oh yes, yes. Man, that's yeah, I remember that show. I liked the regular show. That was a really good show. It
Regular show.
yeah. Did you have a favorite episode?
I liked them all like pretty equally. Like I liked when they get to go kind of like into space and all that stuff. But I can't really remember any specific ones because I haven't seen it in so long. But the last like cartoon show that I'd rewatched from childhood was Adventure Time. So
Was which one?
Adventure Time.
Oh yeah, I never got into that one.
Okay,
But
Adventure Time is so good too.
mm, yeah, man. Do you believe in awkward moments?
Yeah,
You do.
yeah. Things can be awkward. You can sense an energy, and you're like, ooh. I mean, like recently, not super recently, like March. Is that considered recently? Jonah, right?
I guess so, yeah. Yeah.
In March, I went on like 2 dates with this person. First of all, they asked me out, and I didn't know that it was a date. So we were getting coffee, and I was like, wait, are we on a date right now? And they were like, yes, question mark. And it was pretty awkward. The whole thing was awkward. And I was like, you know what? They like me. Let's go on a second one because I'm weird. And it was awkward again. And yeah, it was mostly silent. It can be awkward. Silence can be very comfortable with the right people. You know each other really well, or maybe you don't, and you're just okay sitting next to each other and not talking and doing your individual tasks. But it was silent, and it was kind of like a weird silence. And the conversation wasn't super flowing, and it was awkward. It was physically kind of awkward. Like, there wasn't a compatibility. So I definitely do believe in awkward moments, but I don't like when it's silent. Someone's like, awkward silence. It's like, okay, it's not 2008. Like, it's okay. Somebody can say something. Silence doesn't have to be inherently awkward, but things can be awkward.
Yeah. When it gets awkward, do you feel scared or nervous, or what is that feeling?
I'm scared. I'm nervous necessarily, but sometimes I'll just like laugh a little, and I'm like, okay, something's a little off. It's more of a discomfort than, I guess, where it's like, things could be going better right now, and you know that in your body. For me, I guess it feels like a little bit of a tightness, and I'm like, now what? But not like an anxious tightness.
Mm. Yeah. I feel kind of bad right now because like the audio is kind of rough.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
My computer is so terrible.
Yeah, no,
And
it's
although
cool.
Windows, if you're listening, send me a new laptop because this one is terrible. It doesn't
Yeah.
update. I can't use Google Chrome. Literally, the cord sucks. It's like the cord has like a little piece at the front, and then it connects to the larger cord, and it's really annoying. And the screen has a big crack through it because my dog sat on the
Damn.
laptop. And yeah,
Damn.
it sucks. And if I go anywhere near the screen, it'll start. It's like a touch screen, but it like really like spazzes out. And headphones do not connect. Even though I connected the headphones, I put them in and I wasn't hearing you through the headphones, like just through the regular speakers. So it's really annoying. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, no, it
And obviously
happens. It
it's looking
happens.
terrible. It's
Yeah.
terrible on my end.
No, it's cool. It's cool. It is what it is, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. It looks
Yeah.
bad though. I'm sorry about it. We're running your podcast because they are just popping out all over the place. I'm
Yeah, you're
sorry.
like a ghost. You're like a ghost. It's yeah, it's okay. Yeah. But yeah, do you have any like questions for me?
Questions for you. What's next? You just graduated college. So, right?
How do you know this?
Because you told me, obviously.
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, that question comes often. What's new? I like to keep it a mystery.
Okay, so no next plans. Nothing lined up yet. Or you
Well,
do have it and you don't want to share on the pod.
yeah, it's actually a bit of that. I feel like it's something I'm still learning. Like telling people things and not telling people things. Sharing things and then not sharing things. It's like you gotta like time it right. You gotta know when's the right time to share type of thing. I don't know, something like that.
Okay. Well, how do you differentiate? Like, what is too confidential to share and what is okay to share? Like, what are your personal standards?
I don't know. There's a lot I really don't share. Actually, it's something I was thinking about the other day. There's this dude, Sheikh Amar. He's like this really cool guy. And I've been like a student of his, I guess you could say, for like 2 years now. And the interesting thing is, he has never ever asked me a personal thing about myself, which is wild. I was just thinking about it. And I realized that I actually really respect him for that, which is interesting. Like, he just never pried. And not to say that it's a bad thing to pry, it's like totally cool to ask people questions. I enjoy asking people personal things as far as they're comfortable in sharing. But that was something I was thinking about. Like, wow, this guy never asked me ever a personal thing about my life. It's always just been like business or knowledge or whatever, and that's it. I just thought it was a very fascinating sort of relationship. Like, huh.
Yeah. For me, I would take that as like almost an offense. I'd be like, are you not interested? Do you not like me? Do you not want to look? But I'm a very personal person. I'm very uh people have told me I'm pretty sincere and vulnerable and open. So my person would be like, what's the tea? Like, why don't you want to ask me about stuff? Like, why don't you want to talk about personal stuff? Because to me, it doesn't make sense to have it as a secret. I mean, there are secrets that people can have, but I don't think that anybody has gained anything by not sharing when you could share.
Mm. Do you think people lose anything by sharing?
I guess if you feel like you shared with the wrong person, like let's say you have something that's very personal to you, like a trauma or something, and you have a friend and you confide in that friend, and then maybe that friend goes and tells three other people, then maybe that, but you wouldn't know if it was the wrong decision until after, until that other person had broken your trust. But then
Yeah.
again, in sharing, you can be like, hey, this is personal. Don't share it with anybody else. Like I'm confiding into you specifically. So it's definitely something that is heavy on communication. Like you have to be straightforward with your intentions and what you want from somebody who's hearing whatever you want to share. But I think generally there's nothing that's too personal. I always tell my friends, like, whenever they're like, I don't want to trauma dump, or like, I don't want to, make you uncomfortable or too much information. And it's like, there's not too much information for me. It's like, you're my friend and I want to hear whatever you want to share with me, no matter what. I mean, maybe I might get uncomfortable depending, or I might feel like, whoa, that's crazy. But, you know, it's more like I'd rather be a friend to somebody than get a little bit uncomfortable. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I really like how you're sharing this, actually. For me, I kind of stopped sharing things about myself around like 19. And it was because like I felt like I shared something like pretty important with someone and they just didn't care. And I was like, oh my God. And so since then, I kind of just have this thing in my head, which like, I really feel like people just don't care. So I might as well keep that to myself, to my writings. And if somebody does care, it's in the writings. But yeah, I think that's what it is for me, you know? I just feel like people don't care.
I
Which
think
is why I feel like it's important in many different things that if you do care, you make a show of it. You show that, hey, I really care. Like, hey, oh, you got me that gift. Wow, thank you. That was really nice of you. Like that kind of a
yeah,
thing.
yeah, I'm really interested, and I'm sorry that that person made you feel like what you shared didn't matter necessarily, or that they didn't care. And that's completely on that person and not on you. Because if anything, it's very um brave or uncomfortable to share things with somebody, and to get the response is really disheartening. So I'm
Yeah,
sorry about it. But I wouldn't let that stop you from sharing with the people who you know already care, you know? Um,
yeah,
because it just says something about that specific person, and like maybe they're somebody who's not personal, or maybe that's not how they're able to show their affection or their caring or their friendship or whatever. Um, but obviously, you're free to do whatever you want, and writing is always a good outlet, you know? And you're always free to share those writings with people who ask or who do care and that kind of stuff.
yeah. Another interesting thing I was talking to my friend Sheikhani about was sometimes you tell people like things and they're important things, but then you and that person, you just part ways. You're not like friends anymore. You just don't have that connection anymore. And Now, like a piece of you is out there in the world with them, and they're somewhere else. It's like, wow, you have a piece of
Yeah,
me out there somewhere. It's
there,
wild,
but you have a piece of them as well.
and you have a piece of them as well. Yeah, you're right.
I
You're
mean,
right.
and it's not, it's kind of scary, but it's also kind of beautiful because um we're all tapestries of each other, you know. You
Yes,
hear something funny
through
that your
heaven's
friend says and
eyes,
you, yes,
Prince of
and you
Egypt.
repeat it. Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Like, you know, it's kind of nice. And it can be kind of scary, but it's also kind of nice.
yeah. Jonah, we're coming to a close. We got like 3 minutes on the clock. I was wondering, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you felt like you wanted to say, but you didn't get a chance to, or something on your mind you wanted to express?
Um, I did want to circle back low key to Adam and Eve and say that the difference is, first of all, I'm surprised that it could be wheat. I never heard that. Um, but in the Jewish story, Jewish version of the story, it's like a snake. He's like a snake, but he like looks like a lizard. He's like an evil little lizard, who tells Eve about the apple or whatever fruit it is. It's not necessarily an apple. Um, and then God gets so mad at him. Um, and the apple holds like the truth of the universe of like the the bad stuff and like the goods and the bads and like those knowledges that we now can see that unlocked us into this hell world that we live in. Um, but God got mad at the snake and then chopped his legs off, and that's why snakes crawl on their bellies. Towards
Oh,
us.
interesting, interesting.
They want to sort of,
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing. I also just had one closing thought, and it was one of my favorite stories is when Moses and the people are at the sea and the Pharaoh's army is right behind them. In the Muslim tradition, we believe that the people are freaking out, like, "Yo, Moses, where's your God now, man? We're gonna die." And he turns to them and he says, "Be grateful." And when people are panicking and rushing like that, that doesn't sound like the logical thing to say to them. Be grateful. But the interesting thing about the Muslim tradition is we believe that when you're grateful, God increases you. And that's the moment when the sea splits and they all pass. That's just one of the closing thoughts that I wanted to share. But I
love
had
that.
fun. I had fun talking to you, Jonah. Um, the audio was a little rough, but I enjoyed this
I'm
conversation.
sorry.
It was a good one. It was a good
Yeah,
one.
it was a good conversation. Sorry about the audio. I would look. I
Yeah.
think it's a good note to end on. Be grateful.
Yes. Yes. Well, I suppose until next time, eh? You take care.
Have a good day.
Thanks.